666.
Saudi Arabia was considered the 28th best country to live in as an expat, and the United States ranked 30th, according to the Expat Insider 2023. In February, a survey was sent to more than 12,000 expatriates living in 172 countries with an online questionnaire organized into 5 categories. Participants were asked to rate 56 factors in the categories of quality of life, ease of settling in, working abroad, personal finance, and expat essentials. Only countries with a sample size of at least 50 participants were considered.
That is shocking. You would think that expats would prefer living in the United States over Saudi Arabia. At least that would be like the thing that I would expect. But it was also interesting, Richard. Saudi Arabia was 4th in the MENA region. Bahrain was 1st. And then the UAE 2nd, Oman 3rd, and then Saudi Arabia ahead of Qatar as well. So that's interesting. And then Turkey was way back, 20 places behind Qatar. So I don't know how much these things really matter, Richard, but it does. I mean, especially when you make a comparison between 2 countries, although it is a pretty fair poll, but it really shows mostly, it speaks more to Saudi Arabia than it does against the United States, in my opinion, that it's becoming more and more livable for expats. It's interesting.
Well, ultimately, you're going to go where the jobs are. There is a quality of life aspect. And in terms of comparison to Saudi and America, there may be Muslims who much prefer to be in Saudi and so on and so forth. Yeah, there's a lot of factors involved. I mean, the one constant, it seems to be that Kuwait is always ranked last, and they've sort of developed a reputation over the years, decades, of just being inhospitable to expats and foreign labor. Which, I mean, that's been consistent. So we don't know. At the top of the list, by the way, globally, Mexico is top of the list, followed by Spain, then Panama.
Oh, Panama.
And
sweet.
as you mentioned, Bahrain was the only one to make the top 10 list, with UAE and Oman just outside of the top 10 at 11 and 12.
Yeah, Richard, you were right, by the way. Saudi Arabia earned lower scores in the categories of quality of life and ease of settling in, but excelled, including working abroad. So that's where the jobs are in Saudi Arabia, and I think that's reflected here. That is interesting.
But these are the kind of metrics that Saudi, under the Vision 2030, pay attention to. This is, they'll take this and say, all right, we're falling short in some areas. I hope they'll take this but it seems to be the habit where they're really trying to these benchmarks and metrics that are global in nature and repeatable. They like to climb up the standings, and so hopefully they'll take this and go, okay, where are we missing on this, and what can we do to make the experience more positive so we can attract the best talent available.
Oops, sorry, bad use of the mute button there, Richard. I will say that it does seem, this is one person's opinion, but it does seem that Saudi Arabia is much more livable now than it was 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago as an American. Obviously, this is expats all around the world, so not really speaking to Americans, but it seems more and more realistic that an American would take a job in Saudi Arabia now versus way before, when they didn't have some of the best restaurants in the world and Riyadh season and a really increasingly interesting Saudi Pro League and all these other things going on. So they are working on the quality of life situation. Visiting there, you just did recently as well. It's a lot more fun. So and that's just the fun. That's just the non-work side of it.
I was having a discussion recently with someone, and they were talking about, we won't mention them. They were talking about the regional HQ process and internally convincing people to relocate from the Emirates, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, to Riyadh. And the person was saying, a lot of the complaints, schools, things to do, don't really obtain anymore. This is their perspective. They said the biggest difference was alcohol, but all the other things that were mentioned, this person thought they were dated and out of they weren't consistent with the current situation. And that's just, I just offer that, as an observation, as that somebody made to me who's actually in the mix.
Yeah. Richard, we did a segment on whether or not Saudi Arabia will allow alcohol eventually, soon, later. It's just interesting. It's like when, I got in one person's opinion, but when you're there, I don't think about it at all. It's not like I miss it, or like, oh, I really wish this dinner had alcohol. It's just strange. So some say that it's coming, and some say it's coming imminently. I don't know if I see that. It just kind of, from talking to people, it doesn't seem like many people want that. I mean, I guess that's usually one of the first things that comes to mind when you say, "Oh, I'm going to move to Saudi Arabia, or I'm going to be there for 2 weeks." It's like, well, can you get a drink anywhere? And it's like, well, no, you can't. But it's interesting. So
That is,
um,
that will be interesting. I mean, and we'll watch this and we'll track it certainly if anything breaks. There's a lot of mixed messages in that. One, I think it'll be fascinating if they can ramp up these tourism numbers, adventure tourism, historical tourism, without alcohol. If the numbers are going up without this. The other thing is Sean Matthews, who writes for Middle East Eye, did an interesting piece on the yachting uh, industry in Saudi Arabia and how they're really promoting the yachting scene on the Red Sea, and how, and it's a little bit of a dichotomy in the sense that the yachting scene really likes alcohol. That's part of the sort of culture. Uh, but and Sean Matthews was talking about this. When people showed up for the F1 in Jeddah and docked, their yacht came and did all the show and all the entertainment. There was plenty of alcohol to be had through various means and that sort of thing. It's not official, and certainly maybe that's not something that anybody wants to talk about. But I just say there's a little, I only offer this as everyone's trying to figure it out, what the practice is, what should be legislated, what should be policy, what's needed. And to go back to the beginning, I'll be fascinated if Saudi Arabia finds they can reach their 100 million tourists by 2030 mark that they have set as their goal without allowing alcohol. They may be able to do it
yeah,
because
or yeah, go ahead, please. Sorry.
sorry to interrupt. A lot of travelers like you and me will go, will enjoy it. Alcohol is not a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a big part of it at all, and I think people are aware of that it comes with serious consequences, and it comes with consequences in the United States. I mean, there's alcohol causes a lot of problems here, and we tried and succeeded in banning alcohol. It was a huge part of our culture. It was part of all the immigrants' culture that pretty much that came in, almost all of them. And in the 20s, we banned alcohol, and we banned alcohol for a while. And part of the reason why it didn't, and it was popular, it was banned not because it was some authoritarian, legislating on others thing. It was enormously popular. The reason why it failed is because, a lot of the enforcement regimes were underfunded. There's a great documentary about it, one of my favorites of all time, from Ken Burns, on prohibition and just sort of how it fell apart. But there are a lot of people that understand that it comes with a lot of challenges. And if you introduce, like, for example, if Saudi Arabia were to say, hey, we're going to legalize alcohol tomorrow and it's going to be everywhere, this is a culture that does not drink for the most part. So, you'll get a lot of inexperienced drinkers. You'll have drinking and driving. There's a lot of problems that come with it. And so I think this is just an opinion, but I think that maybe it'll just be very hush hush, and if you want it, you can get it. I don't know. It's something that I think about all the time because it's really hard to see happening, but it also kind of seems like it's going to happen. So
Yeah, yeah. There's a yes. I can't make a call on that. People will just presume it'll happen. Some people will say that maybe it'll be just in certain zones. For the longest time in the Emirates, you can only drink in hotels. Um, you know, the same thing that happened in prohibition. I mean, it led to the criminal enterprises, which they're problematic in and of themselves. So I don't know. It'll be interesting, but you could certainly see a world where they can reach a significant goals in terms of tourism where alcohol is not part of it. You could also see a world where it's very constrained and constricted to things like, Red Sea Islands or yachting resorts or Neom, although that's, that might, they might have a huge population, at least as, initial steps. And we always have to remember Saudi Arabia society is conservative. It remains conservative. It's not a big fan of alternative lifestyles, certainly doesn't like drug use. Um, and this is this is not a passing thing. People feel this very deeply. So I think with anything like this, the government would be very careful in their choices.
Yeah, fascinating topic, Richard. This was one of the longer yellows. This sort of opened up an interesting a
But
bunch of different avenues.
let me add, and I'm gonna go back to the same thing. I probably said the same. This would be the third time. I said way back when, and Lucian, we've been together for a long time, but I always said, the Saudis like, and actually any responsible government, if you're looking for a cultural or social change, it's the Saudis have tended to wait until there's an economic imperative that compels this change. A perfect example is women driving.
Yep.
You could have said, vast numbers of Saudi policymakers were just fine with this, but they needed the economic cover to put it out there as this is the new thing. We're doing this differently. Same thing, getting women in the workforce. This is, it's not a social or cultural assault or a modification of what we know and have known. It's an economic imperative. And so, maybe if tourism is struggling, or if they just can't get certain things off the ground, maybe they say, okay, we got to do alcohol, guys, because people aren't coming. That's sort of what I'm saying. If people are coming, that economic imperative isn't so great.
Yeah, I mean, you have been very consistent on that, and that's a good point because I don't know, like is there one right now? Not really. The tourism numbers are doing really well. The economy's doing really well. Development, we just talked about the construction and new contracts, everything awarded, is fastest in the Middle East. It doesn't seem to be an imperative right now. Although, if you want more F1s and a really good yachting scene like you get in Monaco, maybe. But I mean, that's not an easy sell.
And it may come down to an aspirational choice. I mean, the Crown Prince has said, our reference point is Miami. And being that, it's more than just a job, it's a quality of life. All the things that are available to you when you step out outside the office door in Miami. Entertainment, activity, weather, this and all that. That's what we want to be able to offer. Maybe that, inevitably part and parcel of that is an opportunity to consume alcohol.
Yeah. And Richard, there have been experiments, maybe I mentioned this on a recent episode, but globally, Portugal legalized all drugs. And there was a feature length piece in the New York Times a few weeks ago about how poorly that's going and how they're trying to roll that back because it just didn't really work out. I mean, the idea is okay that, you don't want to make criminals out of people that have a addiction issue, but at the same time, it creates so many problems. And so, it's just, it's just a self-determination issue too, because what's good for us or what's good for Portugal or the UK isn't necessarily good for Saudi Arabia or China or anywhere else. So,
and there's always a danger, like Amsterdam. There's always a danger of liberalizing when others aren't, because all of a sudden you're going to attract, all the characters and the profiles, and it'll be concentrated. So it's not like, those people that are really, really interested in drugs and that sort of thing are distributed around the world. They're all coming to Amsterdam. Or they're all coming to Portugal, and then it becomes a real problem. You see this in San Francisco when they're, homeless policies, which have been very generous. Places, it's just problematic.